All right, 1 Samuel 3. Let's look at this next set of 7 chapters, this week's set of chapters, from the perspective of uncertainty for a number of reasons. Why? One, because I'm hoping to keep these two more or less through the Bible in 3 minutes or so as opposed to 5, because I want to make sure that of all the things we could talk about in each of these chapters, I try as best I can to focus on the parts of these chapters that seem to develop that concept of uncertainty, because two, it seems to deal with uncertainty from at least 3 different perspectives. One, from the perspectives of people who have devoted their lives to the work of God. We're going to see how they have uncertainty that they have to resolve in these chapters. Likewise, the nation of Israel is going to have its own national uncertainty. And even those who are not the people of God, the non-believers, are going to be dealing with certain levels of uncertainty. And the one thing we're going to see through each of these chapters is the way in which, not so much that they meander or wander or linger in uncertainty, but the kinds of things that will help motivate God to actually respond in times when all of these different groups of people are uncertain. And so in this chapter, let's call it Who, because we're going to see God begin to establish a relationship with Samuel. And when he does, it's going to catch Samuel off guard, and he is not going to be sure who is talking to him. How do we know? Because it's going to seem to be set at a time when he and Eli are resting. And Samuel, in his place, is going to hear a voice. And thinking it's Eli, he is going to go to Eli and say, "You called me." And this is, of course, my paraphrase, but Eli's going to say, "It wasn't me." So Samuel's going to go back to his place of rest. He's going to hear a voice again, go back to Eli and say, "You called me." But Eli is again going to say, "It was not me." So Samuel's going to go back to his place of rest, where for a third time he's going to hear a voice, and he's going to go back to Eli again and say, "I'm here because you called me." And this time Eli is going to get it. This may actually be God beginning to talk to Samuel directly. And so he's going to say, this time, go back, and when you hear the voice, say, "Speak, Lord." Samuel is going to obey Eli and God, and he's going to say, "Speak, Lord," at which point God is going to give him a very difficult word about what is on deck for Eli and his family. Understanding back in chapter 2, we've already seen a prophet being sent to them to say that the sins of Eli's sons, meaning the ways in which they misused their privileges in the priesthood, are now going to be turned into consequences. So the next morning, Eli is going to be very curious about what God told Samuel, since Eli was used to hearing from God directly, even though at the beginning of the chapter we're going to find out that the word of the Lord was rare in these days, quite possibly because of the ways in which his sons had misused the priesthood. But now a line of communication is being reestablished, and the good thing about Eli is he is not going to stand opposed to the way in which God is now seeming to use Samuel to try to redirect Israel back to a path of stability, understanding that in a very practical sense, when we have uncertainty about what the word of God is saying, we can take an isolated passage out of context and misunderstand it, or we can understand what's going on here in the way in which an understanding of the smaller context. Wait a minute, a prophet has already been sent to Eli to help him understand the future for his family. And then in a larger context, we know that God is trying to redirect Israel to the path of not only prosperity, but a prosperity that exists with an uncommon peace. And understanding that Samuel now has a context to say, "Oh, wait a minute. The voice that I'm hearing is consistent with things that we've heard from God." And so in addition to the smaller and larger context, God himself is going to confirm the words that he's speaking to Samuel. When in this chapter, in verse 19, it's going to say, "And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground," which is extremely similar to the way in which Isaiah says that God confirms the words of his servants in Isaiah 44, around verse 24, where it says, "I am the Lord." And in verse 25, it goes on to say, "Who frustrates the signs of liars and makes fools of diviners, who turns wise men back and makes their knowledge foolish, who confirms the words of his servants and fulfills the counsel of his messengers." And so to the degree we likewise are trying to genuinely understand who it is that's speaking to us and whether or not those words are coming from the Lord, he has given us the smaller and larger context of understanding the way in which he's using his people to help restore peace to all mankind. And then moreover, the way he uses circumstances beyond their control to confirm whether or not the things that they are saying are truly from God, which is why we often say God's best to you as you go forward in him, genuinely trying to discern who it is that's speaking to you and whether or not it's wise counsel from God.